After months of political campaigns, the much-anticipated 2024 Edo State governorship election is still underway in most parts of the state. Now, voting has, however, ended in parts of the state, with counting already in progress in the election across all the 18 local government areas. Now, all eyes are on the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to deliver a free, fair, and credible election for the people of Edo State. Now, at least 2,249,780 voters who collected their permanent voters cards, PVCs, have expectedly participated in today's election. This number, according to INEC, represents 85.57% of the 2.629025 million total registered voters in the state, with 379,245 uncollected PVCs. Joining us in the studio to take a look at unfolding events in Edo State is the chair of the Watching the Vote Working Group of Yaga Africa, Dr. Hussaini Abdu, and I will be joined later on by a former National Commissioner of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor K. Ibiano, during the course of the show, to help us understand what we have at the moment. Thank you so much, Dr. Hussaini Abdu, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, the much-anticipated Edo State election is here, and you would have been monitoring what's going on from your observers in Edo State. Talk to us about what Yaga Africa is already receiving from its observers.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Edo elections in recent time has been the first election in the chains of off-season elections, and so normally a testing ground to see the new directions of INEC, new capacity, new systems, new processes. And I think it is not disappointing. We've seen the whole chains of events leading to these elections. But I think since morning, Yaga Africa has been one of the leading observer groups on these particular elections. We deployed 300 permanent observers across over 200 polling units in the state, and we have 25 roving observers also helping to collate information around this. And keyly, what came up is also one of the major issues is that we still have late opening of elections. 7:30 was supposed to be practically just less than 50% of the polling unit were opened at 7:30. But at 9 o'clock, a significant number of them have opened. But again, the late opening you find in some polling units, particularly those in Edo Central and Edo South, happens to have opened much earlier than those in the southern part of Edo. With almost all the polling units have received their beavers, which is the most important device in vote accreditation and also voting process. And we think that just about 2%, which is also a very significant improvement, had issues with their beavers here and there. And we've seen INEC respond very swiftly. We also saw more polling units also that have more than one beaver. Sometimes because of the size of such polling unit, you want to put more of these devices to ensure that there is quick accreditation. Because of the late opening, INEC was also swift to issue a statement to actually say that we're not going to close at 2:30 as defined. As long as people remain on queue, those who have late opening are going to continue voting until the last person as at 2:30, and that's a very encouraging one, because that came out much earlier, and therefore people are more prepared for that. There are no major critical incidences in here and there. In some polling units, there were cases of pressure on the electoral officers to actually not to use the beavers in the accreditation process. And
so that's to embark on manual processes?
To embark on manual processes. And that happens from time to time, because one, people think it is slow in the process. And then when there is a little hitch like this, people put pressure on those people. And I think that's have been properly handled. There are still challenges of vote buying. We experienced that across many polling units, and there were some of them that our observers saw people sharing up to 10,000 naira to voters to induce them to vote towards a particular direction. But of course, the EFCC and police were present in some of those polling units in ensuring that this vote buying thing does not continue. But it has become more or less a recurring decimal in our electoral conversations, that in each election, particularly in off-seasons one, people trying to induce voters to vote in a particular directions. But when it comes to violence, it's been relatively quiet. Of course, there's a lot of hype on the elections, and there was that expectation that some things may go awry in different locations. But I think it's been relatively okay.
All right, very good submission there. But we also have our correspondents on ground that are monitoring the election for us. And of course, I'm being told right now that our correspondent Charles Eruka is joining us right now to provide some updates as to the election coverage. Talk to us, Charles, about the current situation and where you're covering the elections, and of course, what the voting has been like, and of course, the situation report on Collation at the moment.
Good evening, Sumner. Thanks so much. Well, I covered Eastern Central, and part of it was where the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Monday equivalent, voted. And I can report that everything was peaceful, particularly in the polling units where we visited. However, there was an incident in Irua where some of the residents of that polling unit or that polling ward were complaining that some voters who actually registered in their polling unit were not members of their community, so they had no right to vote. They were saying that because they were non-residents, they had been deliberately brought there to swell up the numbers. It was not a very valid reason. But, you know, when it comes to elections, then issues like that become unnecessarily thorny. So as at 10 a.m., voting was yet to start in that unit because of that controversy of non-residents of that ward registering to vote there. But they were legally and legitimately registered. But those who were actually resident there insisted that they would not vote. Anyway, it was a little bit of a controversy. The security officials were there on standby to ensure that there would be no breakdown of law and order. Also, in places where I visited, there were no issues with the beavers. The beavers were working correctly, and it was not an issue at all. The problem was that in the Eastern Central area, there was a heavy downpour this morning. It rained pretty heavily, and that also ensured that people came out rather late. When I spoke to some of the electoral officials, they did say that they were at their polling units as early as 7:30 a.m. So the electoral officials were there on time. The problem being with the fact that nature had to have its way. So it started raining sometime at 8 a.m. And you know, that kept lots of people indoors for about an hour and a half until the rain subsided. And that's when some people started to come out. Now, that also leads us to the issue of, you know, in some polling units, the voters were rather few in number. For instance, in a community in Erua, about 750 voters on the average registered at that polling unit. You know, there were 2 polling units in one primary school. So we had 788 voters in unit 2. We had 765 voters in unit 1. In unit 1, where you had 765 registered voters, as at 1:30 p.m., only 150 people had actually voted. In unit 2, where you had 788, it was also that number, about 150, 160 that voted. So a very minor percentage. When I asked one of the community leaders what the issue was, he said in the run-up to the polls, there was the problem of voter intimidation because of pockets of violence around that community. Sambo.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Talk to us about what the candidates themselves are saying. I mean, what's been their observation of the voting process, including their own voting procedures, and of course, what their own maybe situation room is saying in their political parties?
Well, I did speak with the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, whose polling unit I covered earlier. And as far as he was concerned, everything went smoothly, everything went fine. He said that the people of Edo State were ready for change, and so they were coming out in their numbers to vote. So he had absolutely no complaints about the voting processes. He had no complaints about the electoral umpire. And of course, he had no complaints about the turnout. As far as he was concerned, everything was fine. He had no issues casting his ballot in his polling unit. As a matter of fact, he queued up like any other person. He was not shunted to the front line. He actually took his place on the queue as soon as he arrived from the back and then continued. So he had no issues.
All right, very interesting observation. Politicians will always say that, but later on you discover that they will be heading to the courts. Just before I let you go, Charles.
We'll be looking out for that indeed.
Talk to us generally on what people are saying about INEC's conduct. I mean, I know that some of the polling units didn't open on time, but of course the voting later picked up. And then generally, I've heard one of the INEC National Commissioner, Rhoda Gomez, actually saying that nobody can bribe INEC officials, that they will make sure that this election is delivered free, fair, and credibly. Talk to us about what you've been saying about the performance of the electoral body.
Well, from what I saw and from what I heard, there were barely any complaints about the electoral umpire. As a matter of fact, I observed that many of the electoral officials arrived at their polling units on time. There were no issues as far as I saw, as far as I heard, about the electoral umpire being bribed or being compromised. Maybe due to the heavy presence of security all over, because, you know, if electoral officials are compromised, then the anger that it would generate would also trigger a reaction among the people. So I think the electoral umpire was actually very careful this time around. However, there remained that issue of the politicians themselves bribing the voters, not the electoral umpire this time around, but the voters. As a matter of fact, we did catch a glimpse of a situation where vote buying was definitely involved, because after a large group of people cast their votes, they actually followed one individual, and there was a circle around him, and people were actually collecting something. Then we spoke to a national orientation official there who confirmed that indeed voters were being gratified, and he was actually very bitter about it. He insisted that when people keep selling their birthright this way, how can Nigeria change?
All right, just quickly also, I've just been receiving information that about 62.16% of the entire results of the Edo State governorship election has already been uploaded on INEC's result viewing portal. I don't know what the collation process is like, and if some of the polling units are already ending collation for us to be able to have up to this percentage. What have you been observing?
Well, actually, in some of the polling units, the low turnout of voters made it very easy for them to finish their own voting processes and upload the results quickly. The voter apathy, in a way, contributed to that. Voter apathy, voter fear, well, it did contribute to the fact that few number of voters turned up at their polling units. So the process ended up quickly, and that is the reason why, you had the results uploaded. And then let's also take into consideration the fact that heavy security presence ensured orderliness in many of the polling units. So the process was smooth enough, and that would also account for why it was easy for the process to be concluded quickly enough for the results to be uploaded. I'm very sure that's the situation, based on what I saw.
All right, we must thank you immensely. Charles Eruka, Arise News correspondent, providing speedy updates for us there and bringing our viewers up to speed on as to what's going on in different parts of Edo State, specifically where he is with the Edo State APC governorship candidate who voted in that axis. We must thank you so much for bringing us updates, and continue to stay safe right there, Charles, for us. Well, I'll come back to you, Dr. Hussein Abdu.
Yes.
you would have heard what's going on. I mean,
Absolutely.
this is our own election observer. I mean, so our correspondent is telling us that the election went very well, but of course you have these issues of low voter turnout, and then of course the issues of voter inducement. You had said that earlier yourself, that was this situation you were receiving from your situation room. Now talk to us about the conduct of politicians on election day like this. Would have heard you would have heard our correspondent saying that all of them are saying that the election is going on smoothly. The voting process was okay. But well, as we get into collation, what do you expect?
Normally because the voting process is not complete until the election results are announced. So it's a complete cycle of the election. So of course, in one phase of it, at least we've seen this first phase, which is more around people casting their vote, results being pulled together in the polling unit and uploaded in the IRF. So for now, we are getting that going on smoothly, and I don't really think anyone can contest the reality of the situation. People expected it to go violent. It's not violent in any way. Voter intimidation was relatively minimal because intimidation is often used to suppress voters. And normally what we have seen in previous elections is that you try to ensure that you disrupt the process in the stronghold of your opponent. And that's what we have seen with politicians. But we didn't see that happen now. And it's quite welcoming, and also to hear the key figures, and particularly some of the candidates coming up to say, oh, the conduct was good enough. But again, politicians, because, you know, democracy is not simply around processes and the institution, as important as those things are. I think there's a very important element of democracy which is around the values of democracy. And I think that's always the missing link in our politicians. There are people who espouses and express democracy verbally and their engagement, but they don't imbibe those values, those
culture, the democratic culture.
That culture that defines what democracy is, and that's the problem. When you go into contest, it is clear someone has to win. And when there is a winner, there will surely be somebody losing. And when you go in with that in mind, all you are just checking is to see, has the process been properly okay? If it's okay, you accept, you congratulate the winner, and then you move on and prepare for the next elections. But what we're seeing from some of our politicians, even people that are obviously and clearly, they don't actually have that strength to win, are the ones that even complain much louder. We go to court, we distract and distort processes. Of course, the court is still part of the elections, and we don't want to take people's right to go to court away, but we think that we can better strengthen our electoral process and system by recognizing that, look, when people win and we congratulate them, you prepare yourself, and the next time you may actually be the winner. But for now, we are not seeing any major or hearing any major complaint from some of the key actors for now. But until we are done with the collation process, we are not able to conclude on what will happen. Because the collation has also been a major weak link.
I mean, that's what most people have often said, that this is the weakest point of the electoral system.
It's the weakest point of the electoral system. But what has also helped in this collation is that we are seeing the result being uploaded in the IRF. And so when you have it in the IRF, it becomes very difficult for anybody to obstruct or distort some of the details that are coming from there, because people are already like, we are stations. As it's being uploaded on the IRF, we are downloading those things, and we are comparing notes.
Before anything happens, I mean, you are downloading. Okay,
we are downloading them, and then we are verifying as it's been officially announced at different units, and we know which one has been correctly announced and which hasn't been correctly announced. And because, again, we have huge presence and we do statistical analysis in terms of defining where we want to be, we are also the only observer group that has the capacity to actually tell you that this is the possible winner of the elections. And normally, before the results are announced, and like later today, we may be addressing a press conference to say that we know according to our statistics, we think the winner, we may not announce it because that's not our responsibility, that's our next job. But we could actually be able to say that we know the winner and the winner will win by so margin and all that, and that we call on INEC to ensure that the right person is announced as the winner. And so by the time INEC announced its result, we are also able to come out and verify and say the result announced by INEC is confirmed, or we have failed to confirm because we think something went wrong here and there. So our call to INEC, and we've actually issued that earlier in our early report, to say is for INEC to remain committed to its process, to its system, and ensure that it gives Nigeria better elections in this governorship election, because, again, as the first off-season elections, we'll soon be going to Ekiti, we'll soon be going to Osun, and so on, Ondo. And so as you go into this, it is very clear that Nigerians are looking forward to these elections, and the call is that INEC to do the right thing.
All right, a very interesting perspective. And just while we're ongoing, an INEC official actually sent me the link of the IREV, and I actually, compared with what I'd had earlier. So it's actually going smoothly, because as at the last time I spoke, it was 62.16%, but right now the result portal is showing 77.30% of the results uploaded.
Just barely 3-4 hours after. After
so that's just what I'm saying. This looks good.
It looks very good
at the face value.
At the face value.
Until we're able to get the field reports to go with this.
Because IREF is not a collation. You're just posting results. And it doesn't do the collation. The collation is still manual in process. But what is expected is that you are going to be using those results that has been posted in IREF in your collation process.
All right. Thank you so much, Rotimi Oyekanmi, for sending me that. He's the CPS to the INEC National Chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu. And so, Dr. Hussein Abdul, if there was any controversy that we had with our last general election, it was this process. This process of collation and process of results uploading on IREF. Should Nigerians believe whatever is being posted here, that, this will be owned up by INEC and it won't be discarded or be controversial to the extent that this won't count, maybe if this election does, get to the courts?
No, I actually think that the portal is INEC's own. And the system that is actually used to upload is still INEC, because they use the beavers to do those posting. And INEC has no reason to disown what it has there. And INEC is also aware the political parties have their situation rooms. There are independent agencies like ours that also have our situation room. And as it's being posted, we are downloading. And we are not only downloading and keeping them printing manually, we are also setting up a parallel system.
Like a database.
That's a database where we can also be able to collect in case anything happens. And INEC is very much aware of that. So I don't see INEC disowning its own system. I think that once you have the IRF works well, it makes collation very easy, and it also makes dispute management also very easy. Because all the results that we posted would have been signed by the polling officials and also countersigned by agents. And from what we have received from our own situation room, PDP, for instance, has probably the highest number of agents in the polling unit. They have 99%.
Wow.
APC has 98%.
Oh, interesting.
And Labour Party has about 97% of representations of agents in the polling unit.
That's like 1% gap.
That's like 1%. So that's got a massive presence. And it's expected that the job of your agent is to ensure that things are done right, and then they sign. So results will surely be posted in that manner. And the collation, once done in the polling unit and posted, it goes to the local government, and then it now goes to the state level. And so I don't see, once we have this, I think we have made the process of resolving disputes very easy. And even if anyone wants to manipulate, it becomes very difficult to manipulate. You can only do the manipulation before you post onto the IRF. Otherwise, you are just calling for a huge crisis, because people will tell you, this is what you have on IRF.
All right, Dr. Hussein Abdu of Yaga Africa, we'll ask you to just hold on while we go on this short break. And when we come back from this breather, we will be taking a critical look as to how the security agencies have also performed during this election period, and of course what election observers are saying about their performance, and of course the electorate themselves, how they are actually working to ensure that there's good governance through a good voting process. Stay with us as we go on this short break. Thank you so much for still staying with us on Arise News. I'm Sumner Sambo, and of course you're watching a special edition of This Week, which is focusing on our election coverage of the Edo State governorship election. Well, the Edo State governorship election is widely believed to be a contest between two political godfathers, Governor Godwin Obaseki for the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Aswe Godalo, and Senator Adams Oshomole, who is rooting strongly for the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Monday Okpebolo. While Obaseki seeks to establish himself as a major political force in the state, his former ally, Senator Oshomole, is hoping to reaffirm his dominance in the politics of Edo State. There's, however, a third force in the Labour Party and its candidate, Olumide Akpata, who will be hoping to take advantage of any miscalculation on the part of the two leading contenders to create an upset. Well, in all, 17 political parties are participating in the election. In the build-up to the election, political campaigns have been largely marred by violence in some parts of the state, amid hot exchange of words by the leading candidates, which seems to suggest that Saturday's election will not be less violent. Now, to ensure election security, the Nigerian police have deployed 35,000 officers to Edo State, with the Civil Defense Corps providing additional 6,000 officers to secure the vote. Now, the military is not left out. They have the president's command to ensure the election is devoid of violence. There are fears that money bags may exploit the current economic hardship in the country to lure many voters to sell their votes for their preferred candidates through intensive vote buying. We still have right here in the studio with us Dr. Osoni Abdu, who is one of the chair of the working group of the YAGA Africa, the election observer group that is fully on ground in the Edo State governorship election, with observers in several places monitoring the situation. Thank you so much, Dr. Osoni Abdu, for still being here for us. Now, talk to us about the election security. I know INEC has an architecture that actually provides for this election security. It's called ISIS. And then, of course, the security services have also had their own strategies put in place to ensure that there is no violence. There was a very high prediction of violence here, but unfortunately, I think it's good for Nigerians that we haven't really had so much of these issues. But what's been the assessment from your election observers?
Yeah, the INEC is actually to ensure the proper coordination across among security agencies in supporting INEC's delivery. And like we've always argued, elections, of course, INEC set out the system for voting, but elections is not simply conducted only by INEC. The role of security agencies is always very important in that process. And we have seen, we've rather heard a lot of controversies around security and deployment here and there leading towards the elections. But today, I think the major challenge is that we have a high number of security agencies, whether it's INEC, police or the civil defense, or even EFCC in some polling unit in ensuring that vote buying is contained. But again, the major challenge here is that the police officers were unevenly distributed.
Okay.
So you go to some polling units, particularly areas with higher density of voters. So you have limited number of security agents, and therefore some element of thuggery and all that to disrupt. But of course, gets easily restored. But what we have observed across is that although there is no major violence in any of the polling units, but you find that uneven spread of security agents. There are areas where you need them and you have limited number of them. And then in some other areas, you have a higher concentration of them with also relatively small needs for that presence. But be that as it may, we have seen a much more controlled and calmed and elections, relatively speaking, at least on this election. So I think the security agencies did quite well overall.
Okay, so talk to us about the expectations that have to do with voters. I mean, in this election, what some of them are saying is there's an opportunity for them to, if I may use this word, cash out in terms of, making monies from some of these politicians, because they think that they see them once every 4 years. And so some people have gone out of their ways to actually beat the security agencies to this, because the EFCC is on standby, going around and trying to actually hit back at some of those who are engaging in voter inducement. How do you provide this nexus between voters who just want to collect monies from politicians and the EFCC, who is trying to ensure that nobody compromises the process, and the politicians who also want to win votes and get elected?
It's a big challenge, and I actually think that sometimes, including those of us who are observing this, haven't been that nuanced in our understanding. I actually think that it is a wrong idea to take money and vote, and it shouldn't be encouraged in any way. But it is deeper than that. And if you look at the nuances, one, electoral politics has a strong element of gratification. It's either a case of delayed gratification,
yes,
or it's an immediate one. And the delayed gratification is that some people support because they actually think ultimately when we win this election, something will come my way.
Yes.
I can be a commissioner, I can be a contractor, I can be something, and there is something you expect. Or the government may even serve my community better. Or we can get water, we could get electricity. There is something material that is attached to it.
Especially for those looking for appointments.
Or especially for those looking for appointments. So there's something material. But there are also other people who are not in position to access some of those things that could come in a very delayed manner. And they're looking for immediate, particularly in the context where our polity has been deeply corrupt. The level of corruption, the poor performance of our leadership and all that, it creates an impression from some of the electorate that, look, this is the right time to get it out from these people, because after this election, we're not going to see them again. And this is my own opportunity to take. And people go out there, and then the politicians themselves also recognize, because we need to understand the trends, the way these things happen. Previously, the politician keeps money for two things. One is to bribe the electoral officials. That's the design. How do we get money out to electoral officials? And so those who make the hail of the money are supervisors, are people who are the polling officials, and some of the big people in INEC. And then they also keep money for court. So that if anything happens, we don't want to go to court. Some actually are preparing to go to court. And so they know what they will do with their resources when they go to court. But increasingly, as INEC tightens the process, particularly that limited use of technology that we have done, particularly the beavers, bribing the commission or officials of the commission does not guarantee anything. And then you now begin to say you want to reach the voters directly by inducing those voters and ensuring that they are voting for you. Some of them, they can take the money before they vote. Some we have to vote and provide evidence that they voted for a particular party before they get that. So I think if we want to control this, we need to understand the dynamics of it. And then we'll find a better way to deal with it. Policing can be important like the EFCC is doing, but ultimately it wouldn't solve the problem because it is the nature of the context.
And moreover, we can't have EFCC everywhere.
You can't have EFCC everywhere. How many of them do they have? Even the police cannot be everywhere. So we need to continue to educate ourselves. We need to continue to educate our citizens and educate our politicians on the whole challenge of taking money and voting for a particular candidate.
But what some critics will say is that the politicians have so pauperized the voters that they have no choice than to take this. But of course, if you now juxtapose it with the sufferings that people go through after elections.
Exactly. So it's a cycle. They pauperize you, they give you peanut, you take it, you vote for them. They continue the cycle of pauperization. So there have to be a break in that chain.
Well, we hope we'll have a Messiah someday. Well, I'll ask you to hold on now, Dr. Abdu, while we join our correspondent, Ovieteme George, who is right in one of the senatorial districts to help talk to us. And of course, I'm told that he's in Benin South, Benin City specifically. Edo South Senatorial District. Talk to us, Overtime George, on what's been happening and, of course, what the coalition is looking like where you are now.
Well, I've just returned to Benin City, that is the capital of Edo State, after much work on a rainy day at Ewohimi, that is the hometown of the People's Democratic Party governorship candidate, Asue Ighodalo. Well, he did cast his ballot at Ward 1, Unit 3 of that particular primary school in that place. Now, materials actually arrived late. The INEC officials came at about 10:29 in the morning, but after much apprehension, the people were calmed down and all frayed nerves were just calmed down, and then they participated in the exercise. I can speak to you now that collation is ongoing there. They've been counting. I've received some videos, but you know it has to be verified before it can go out. So pretty much a successful day out there, no violence whatsoever, and then the beavers functioned well. You know, the beavers not functioning optimally has been a recurring decimal during elections in Nigeria, but today I saw a different thing. Everything went smoothly, so well before I left there. How did it actually end? I can't say, but I would say the INEC has done some work on itself, and I'll give them pass mark. I will give them pass mark. I don't know about you, Sumner.
The pass mark, but to actually say things the way we see them. So it's good to actually let us and our viewers feel the way you almost felt when you saw all of this. But talk to us, Overtime George, about what the politicians are saying. The PDP candidate had earlier complained about the late arrival of voting materials and all of that. Has he changed his mind? What's the situation room of the PDP looking like if they've been speaking with you?
Sumner, you took the words out of my mouth. Has he changed his mind? Yes, he has. You know, when the INEC officials were not there, he came the first time and left, and came the second time, and of course he was attended to. You know, there was a different atmosphere. The people came back to life, so to speak, because there was much apprehension. They were angry. Asue Ighodalo somewhat exhibited some form of maturity, telling them not to be disappointed, to wait rather, that the INEC officials would come, and they did come. Now, I will tell you, after casting his ballot, it was a different Asue Ighodalo that spoke to journalists there. All the television stations were there, and he exuded much confidence, talking about his belief in the process itself, made some reference to certain places and whatever happened there. But he was so confident, and someone asked him a question. You are the People's Democratic Party governorship candidate. If you eventually are declared the winner, would you be expecting phone calls from others? And what if you lost? Would you make a phone call to others? He said that was more like a legal kind of question. And then he said he was expecting the phone call himself. So after performing his civic rights, he was quite happy. So the atmosphere changed completely from when the INEC officials were not there to when they came and attended to him, an eligible voter. So the man is actually confident, just as the other governorship candidates are exhibiting confidence also. They're exuding so much confidence that they will also win. So it's a beautiful thing to see that there is a common denominator here. All are saying they are satisfied with the process so far. That is good for democracy.
All right, talk to us about what you've observed in terms of INEC's performance, apart from the delayed arrival of materials that we had earlier. There's also the issue of vote buying that's ongoing, and we hear INEC is saying that, look, they are doing their best to make sure that they deliver a credible election. And then, of course, what the security services have been doing. Have you seen any of the EFCC people going to actually campaign against vote buying and arrest people? And then, of course, what your impression has been generally about the turnout of election within the areas you covered?
Well, I did my work as a journalist there, as a reporter. I never saw any exchange of cash or money or whatever it is called. Now, we know that has characterized our elections over the years, talking about Nigerian elections over the years. I never saw, if it was done probably behind my back, but I never saw it, and I had no cause to disturb myself because I did not even see any EFCC official there. Now that could actually raise some suspicion that maybe something like that would be happening. That would make even reporters be on the lookout for such. We never saw any EFCC official. I didn't see any vote buying. It was just a peaceful atmosphere. No tension at all. Not the type that reporters and cameramen will be looking behind them. You know how Nigerian elections are. There could be conflict, and then people will be running. We stayed there, did our work, and left. You talked about the turnout. Now, Sumner, I was shocked. A successful one, I would say, because I saw the elderly more in the number there at Ward 1, Unit 3. That is his community. I saw more of the elderly. Now look at something the INEC officials did, which I actually appreciate also. They allowed the elderly to sit on the plastic chairs. They were the ones to be attended to first. It was a long queue of elders sitting, male, female, and then the youths were standing. They were attending to the elders first, then the youths much later. The turnout was quite impressive. Before I left there were many more still coming. Others were also leaving. It was more like a peaceful atmosphere. The turnout was impressive. But not also that despite the accredited number of voters, those who collected their PVC, when it comes to elections itself, some way, somehow, the numbers will fall short of those who actually collected their PVC. So you are not expecting everyone to turn up for the exercise.
All right, just before I let you go, quickly, talk to us about what you've seen in terms of collation. How is the results collation process going? From what we've seen from INEC website, almost something percent has been uploaded. And then does that mean we could actually have an early call for the announcement of a new governor for Edo State?
Well, you know, when results have been collated, been displayed on the iRev, what many anticipate or expect is that it should be reflective of what is happening in the various polling units and wards where the votes were cast. Now, I haven't taken a look at that to know, but even if I had, I would only be privy to the polling units that I did my work as a reporter, you understand? I could almost predict what happened there, but it's not for me. You know, professionally, we have to wait. I saw what happened there. When I see it in the iRev, if I see something different, I would call you Sumner and say something is amiss. But sincerely, I am impressed with the turnout. I'm impressed with the composure of voters who turned out to perform their civic duties at Ward 1, Unit 3 of Moimi there.
All right, thank you so much, Oveteme George. This is just one aspect of the entire whole. We hope that the entire results for the whole state will look like what you're actually saying at the moment. But we must thank you immensely for providing this feedback. And I can tell you that our eyes are all on the iRev. We're helping you to look at the iRev here. And I'm just telling you that as at now, it's 82.05% of the total results that have been collated in this Edo State governorship election. Thank you so much, Oveteme George. And of course, we hope to continue to speak with our reporters as the coverage continues. And of course, I still have with me right in the studio here, Dr. Hussaini Abdu, chair of the electoral working group of Yaga Africa. He's monitoring the votes. And of course, what's been your impression from what our correspondent is saying? I mean, it looks like INEC gets a pass mark from what people are saying.
It's been very positive about the elections, and almost the positivity can be quite overwhelming. From what I heard from him, he was very quick to give INEC a pass mark. But overall, I think it's a very decent elections, even from ours. There are surely, at the start, there were hiccups, and we did raise that alarm even as at yesterday about it. Because when INEC deploys using National Union of Road Transport Workers, it means you're going to use commercial drivers for that purpose. the discipline, the sense of urgency, the organizations. You don't have that. You don't have absolute control over them. And in those cases, some of them don't come out early. Some of them don't even know where to go because you are dealing with their officials. The officials didn't organize them well. And many times, this has been the major cause of this, of late deployment to different polling units like the experience he shared in that location. And I think INEC was also very quick to recognize that this happened because materials supposed to, and polling officials and materials supposed to be in the polling unit by 7:30. And like I said earlier, less than 50% of the polling unit had that. And even at 9 a.m., we just had about 78% of them actually present. So that tells you there is a significant level of late opening in many of those polling units. But INEC reaction was swift. They ensured that those openings happened, and then they also issued a statement to clarify and say, look, we are going to remain until the last person is able to cast his vote, which is very encouraging. So we hope INEC will continue to learn from this kind of situation. The logistics of managing elections in Nigeria is huge.
Yeah, I mean, very huge.
It's very huge. And it's a huge country. And even in a state like Edo, different geographical formations, different levels of access, even in terms of road networks.
Yeah, within the same state,
that's within the same state. So it's a huge logistics. And in other climes, sometimes elections logistics are actually managed by different bodies. And could INEC begin to think about sometime? But I know Nigerians will still not trust some of those things. We are so much into this control. When we have a logistic company, proper, decent, that is strong, and I can outsource some of these kind of assignments to. They have the discipline, they will have the organizations, and then we have an institution that can be held responsible for the logistics of managing some of these things. Otherwise, logistics has been a recurring concern in INEC, whether it is a general elections or it's an off-season election like this one that we're having. But INEC needs to continue to think about the best way to manage this kind of situation. But overall, I think INEC did well. And for the IRF to currently, you are saying we have over 80% of results posted there.
Yeah, it's actually.
It's really very encouraging for INEC. It also shows clearly that the beavers, a significant percentage of the beavers did work, and they worked well. And for me, we encourage INEC to continue.
All right, just before I let you go, Dr. Hosseini Abdu, when it comes to off-season election, INEC is always at its best.
Yes.
The results look like almost what the expectation is.
Yes.
But when it comes to general election, it's a different mix. Very quickly, why is there usually that difference? Does it mean that the lessons are usually not learned very well?
Lessons are learned. I think what normally happens in this kind of off-season elections is that INEC have a significant number of human resources to deploy. So you have all the commissioners actually going there. You can also get some recs from other states to go and support. They deploy everything. The police will deploy a significant number of servicemen to go in there to support the elections because you are mobilizing from even including neighboring states, to go support. But when you are having a general election, you need everyone in their respective locations, and that doesn't work well. And the major one that I was what I mentioned earlier, logistics. Nigeria is a very huge country. The polling unit in countries like India, that's probably bigger than, actually bigger than Nigeria, is an election that runs for weeks. Okay. So it's not a one-day thing.
Not just a one-day thing.
Not just a one-day thing.
We just hope we'll learn very well from all of this. And then, of course, the expectations are usually high when it comes to elections like this. The off-season elections, I remember when former President Buhari came in, and then, of course, we had this off-season election, the governorship elections. I mean, everybody saw how good it was well conducted. But when it came to 2019, I mean, lots of challenges. And then, of course, 2023, it was another challenge. So we just hope that INEC will actually build on some of these instances that we've seen. And we just hope that actually the outcome of this Edo State governorship election would be what exactly the voters went to the voting booths to actually vote. And we're counting on INEC, security agencies, the voters themselves, and everyone, political parties, to be at their best as we await the final outcome of these results. And I can say from what we are seeing, the collation process seems to be going pretty well. And then, of course, IREV seems to be working very well. We just hope everything ends very beautifully. Well, we must thank you so much. Dr. Hussaini Abdul is the chair of the Watching the Vote Working Group of Yaga Africa. And Yaga Africa is one of the election observation missions to the Edo State governorship election. And we've seen fantastic results too from the organization, sending us charts and everything. We're hoping you continue to do well too.